Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the What's Up Wednesday Facilitating Community Inquiry Using Questions to Support Change webinar with Katie Reineke. My name is George Bergstrom, and I'm the Southwest Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be the question moderator for today. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. To register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. This session is 1 hour, so you will receive 1 LEU for today. If you're watching the archived recording of this webinar, the instructions on how to obtain your LEU are available in the video's description on YouTube. Or you can also find those instructions on the Indiana State Library's continuing education site under the LEU policies. I'm now turning the presentation over to Katie.
Thank you, George. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, I will go ahead and get started. So today we are talking about facilitating community inquiry using questions to support change. As George had mentioned, we've left a decent amount of time at the end for questions, but if you do have any burning ones in the moment, I will try to keep an eye on the chat, and George will as well. And I will try to address those if I go along. Additionally, I will ask for some group participation at one point, so be ready for that. A little bit about me. I am the outreach manager for the Evansville Vanderburgh Public Library, and I absolutely love questions. I love them so much. You can ask any of my colleagues, and I love their ability to unleash new ways of thinking and improve library service for our communities. So firstly, what is inquiry? Inquiry is simply a curiosity that you have decided that you want to take action on exploring and further understanding. The inquiry cycle, which I put on the slide here, consists of 5 stages, and it's a framework for the progression of inquiry. It is not linear. It can go back and forth, and you can go through the process multiple times until you have reached a point where you feel you understand or have are ready to move forward. Those 5 stages, I'm sure some of you have seen them, but they're ask, investigate, create, discuss, and reflect. And as I mentioned, it's not linear. If you find you believe you have your question and you go to the investigate stage, you learn some more, you're ready to create something, but then you decide your question needs to be tweaked, or you've already answered it, but you have a more exciting question that you want to explore, so you go back. But I'm going to speak a little further about frameworks that can help you go through this process. Community. Silly question. It may seem silly to ask what community is, but we all may have a different definition of what community means in our minds. And one of the most important questions that we can forget to ask is, who is the community of our inquiry? Is it a cohort of librarians asking how they can get greater attendance at their programs? Is it a nonprofit asking how they can better reach their clients? Is it a neighborhood asking how they can improve educational attainment for their youth? The answer to this question can inform who you include in your inquiry process. And one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen, and that I'm sure some of us have seen, is that we forget to ask the question, who is the community? And then we don't include those who need to be involved in exploring the question. So put those together, and what have you got? What is community inquiry? It is communities together asking questions that matter to their community and can change their community and have lasting impact. So they've decided they all share the same burning question or same burning challenge. So they decided we're going to come together and we're going to act on it. So now that we know what community inquiry is, how do we do it? How do you facilitate community inquiry? Well, there is no simple answer. If it did, I wouldn't have a webinar. But I can tell you from my experience that incorporating these 4 components into your work will greatly increase your chances at successful inquiry. So there, know your question, create a safe space, use a process, and clarify next steps. And now let's break those down a little further. So your core question, I absolutely love this quote, and I'm sure you've seen it before. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and then 5 minutes thinking about solutions. The truth is, we live in a society that rushes to solutions. You can blame the World Wide Web, blame society and its fast-paced environment, blame the educational system, whatever you want to blame. But the truth is, this is the world we live in, and it's fast, and we want to jump to solution, jump to change. So you may think you have your question, and you may think you have it and you want to jump to a solution, but clarifying and spending time to further explore your question is a valuable way to devote your time. I promise it is vital. And I'll give a real life example. So several years ago, one of my colleagues recognized that she wanted to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. She didn't feel the library was doing enough to celebrate that month and that group of people. So she got excited around the idea. She said, okay, I want to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month in a special way. This is what I know about it. I'm going to make a display. She asked the question, she jumped to a solution, and unfortunately that display was not well received. In some cases, it even offended that group of people because it didn't speak to them and it didn't reflect. Now, if she had gone through the process and maybe asked the questions like, who should be involved in this inquiry? Who can help me answer my inquiry? We may have had a different result. Creating a safe space. I had an opportunity to throw my dog in there, so that's Lola. Meet Lola. She's the best dog in the world. Creating a safe space for curiosity. I cannot express enough how important it is to provide a space where people can feel comfortable and open with their curiosity. It's vulnerable and it can be highly emotional. People may want to hold their questions close to their chest for fear of judgment, retribution, being seen as ignorant for not knowing the answer, or having the wrong answer or the wrong question. I apologize. So creating a safe space, it goes far beyond just saying this is a safe space or your questions will not leave this room. That isn't enough. So here are some tips for helping create that safe space. A private setting. You want to select a space that is out of prying ears, prying eyes. It's not public. You don't have a chance of someone walking by, whether it's passersby or colleagues. I emphasize that it's important that you don't have any distractions, both for the possibility that someone might listen in and it's a safe space, or distraction for the participants. Also, table setting is important too. Now, this idea I pulled from one of the processes that I'm going to list later, which is called the World Cafe, which some of you may have heard from, but it's basically where you have several small groups sitting together around tables similar to a cafe setting. It's casual, it's cozy, and it's just more comfortable for the participants. You're not in an auditorium setting where you're sitting all by yourself, but you're also not at a big round table where you may feel, feel pressured to participate when you may not want to. So that's important. Third, food. There's definitely something to be said about breaking bread together. Back in the day, I'm sure you know that people offered food and wine and refreshments as a sign of respect or camaraderie or friendship. It's yet another safety barrier as well. You know, you've got your hands busy, you're filling in those awkward silences. You might be even talking about the food or those bagels, am I right? Third, authenticity. As a facilitator, you practice what you preach. You're asking the group to be authentic, their authentic, curious selves. And if they sense you are putting on a mask or trying to present something other than your true self, they'll be less likely to feel safe and open. You may be nervous, and that's totally okay, but tell the group, say, I'm new to this too. It's only my first, second, third time, and I may mess up, but I'm excited to try this with you. You're in the process together and you're showing your vulnerabilities and you're trusting them with your vulnerabilities, and they will likely return the favor. So my example of being my authentic self is I always employ humor. It's who I am. It may be self-deprecating humor. It may be just, being silly, but that's my natural self. So I incorporate that into my sessions. And the great thing about humor is it calms you. It releases endorphins. And when you laugh together, you bond together, and it can be very powerful. It truly can. So speaking of humor, I said there'd be group participation. This leads to my next session. Bathtub, yes, I said bathtub. So one thing to remember is that regardless of whether we've succeeded at creating a safe space externally, our internal thoughts, our internal habits are still present. And it's tricky to get outside of that mindset. But one way to do it is through imagining the impossible. So if you could do this with me, and in the chat, I'm going to give us a couple of minutes. I want you to try to put all of your judging aside, all of your, okay, what's possible aside. And I want you to think, if I could design the world's best bathtub, what would it have? What would it look like? What would it do? No judgment. I just want you to put as many ideas as you can in the chat, and I'll give about 2 minutes. If we don't have enough, I'll extend it, but go ahead and throw your ideas in the chat now. Water never get cold. Like it. Self-cleaning. 2 people said self-cleaning. All right. You can step down into it. You keep the water at optimal temperature for the duration of the bath. I like it non-slip. It's important. Bubble bath dispenser. I'm loving it. Cushy, cushiony. It's big. I had a friend that said, I want it big enough to where all my friends can be in there. And another person said, I don't want anybody else in my bathtub. Towel warmer. Ooh. It adjusts to your size. So you're like, man, you guys are good at this. Zero gravity. Ooh. I'm going to like the deprivation tanks. Yes. I like that. Self-cleaning, keep water at perfect temp, only room for me. There we go. Throw it in there too. Bubbles can change color and fragrance. Connected to tub per pet. Big enough for kids. Turns book pages for me. Book reader screen. Here come the book ideas. I knew they were going to come. About 1 more minute. Anything else? Pages, built-in sound system. There we go. Mini fridge. Excellent. All good ideas. All good ideas. I love it. Okay. So if you come up with more, feel free to throw them in the chat. I love it. I like the ideas. Okay. So how do we feel? Do we feel a little different? Maybe the energy in the room changed. Maybe there's a little bit more comfort. Maybe there's a little more, your brain's firing. Hopefully you'll notice an energy change. In person, it's even bigger because, your energy, the energies in the room are permeating and people are getting excited together, and laughter, and it's awesome. So people will be more relaxed and more excited, and that's good. It means that they're more likely to be thinking and imagining in a deeper and more creative way. So what's next? You have your question. You have established a safe space and your group is ready to explore. But remember, we're conditioned to want to jump to a solution, especially now that the juices are flowing and the opportunities are endless and we're excited to go. I don't want to see anybody out there going and building and designing and commercializing any imaginary bathtubs. That I don't want that on my conscience. So utilizing a process to guide you through the inquiry cycle will help you avoid jumping to solutions. After years of working with different processes, I learned that there is no one cookie cutter method that works for every community, every inquiry, and honestly, there shouldn't be. Every problem is different, every group is different, and one size definitely doesn't fit all. But luckily, you have choices. And in my personal experiences, I've taken pieces from all of the processes you see on the list and more, and I've kind of created my own little hybrid process. And it took me a while to come to this, but it captures the important pieces that I believe are optimal for a public library setting. So I began with the QFT. And then after I started with some sessions with the QFT, I started incorporating some pieces from these others, the Ambassador Innovation Process, Harwood Community Conversations, I'm sure some of you have heard of those, and the World Cafe. As I had mentioned, that's where I got the idea for the table setting. And I also got the bathtub, a version of the bathtub from the Ambassador Innovation Process. And what that does is throughout every stage, it kind of, it gives you an opportunity to let all of the ideas get thrown out there. Yes, even the impossible. And then after you have diverged, you then converge and you select the priority ideas that you want to move forward with. But like I said, the Ambassador Innovation Process is much more complex, and the question formulation technique is a little more simple and a little more flexible. So that's what I chose to start with. What is a blah, blah, blah? What does all this mean? Okay, so the question formulation technique was established by the Right Question Institute and it was designed for classrooms settings to take a deeper look and ultimately gain a deeper understanding of subject lessons being taught. Now, at this time at my library, we had created a new mission statement, and many staff were a little confused by it. I was asked to facilitate group discussions around gaining a deeper understanding of our mission statement, and I chose to use the QFT. Our mission statement was, we cultivate curiosity by creating wonder. And some staff honestly felt that was vague and it didn't speak to their work. So their ultimate question was, what does this mission mean to me and my work? So they had their question and we were ready to inquire. I gave them the prompt, which was the statement, the mission statement itself, and they formulated questions, which is the first step. These questions ranged from what's the difference between curiosity and wonder to what does curiosity have to do with cleaning toilets? And hopefully, if you have managed to be successful at creating that safe space, you are going to get all kinds of questions, silly ones, deep ones, even troubling ones, but they all need to be there. The second step was to play with the questions by identifying them as open-ended and close-ended. And then you choose a couple of each type and you change them. For example, you take the question, do I love my job, which is a closed-ended question, and you change it into an open-ended question like, why do I love my job? This gives people an opportunity to look at their questions in a different way or realize possible opportunities hidden in the question because of the way they were stating it. Finally, each group was asked to choose 2 to 3 questions to prioritize and take forward. In other words, which questions did they feel were the most important or needed to be answered in order to move forward in their inquiry? After they had chosen their priority questions, they shared all of them with the group as a whole because each individual table had gone through this process. So you ended up with many priority questions. And it's cool to see what the smaller groups came up with and how many overlapped with the whole. These produced, improved, and prioritized questions usually revealed a lot. And at this stage, In my inquiry with my colleagues, I asked them to take those priority questions and pull from them the points that mattered the most and build their own departmental mission statement. It was pretty cool. It was very exciting. Some of them, they came in initially and were like, I don't understand the mission statement. I don't understand why I need to do this. And I don't understand what this has to do with my work. And then they would leave with really powerful mission statements. Like the custodians, for example, they came up with the mission statement: we create clean, welcoming spaces that inspire. And they were excited about it. And they left ready to do their job and fulfill their mission. It was very powerful. There were instances where the group came after a few days, taking the mission back to their work and saying, after doing that, we tweaked it a little, we made this change or we made that. And in some instances, they even said, I like the organizational mission statement. I like how it's open-ended. I like how it's ambiguous and flexible. But at this point, for the most part, my job as the facilitator was done. It ended there. We did what we came to do, and they moved forward with their work. Now, this will not always be the case, of course. It's not always that short and sweet. So it's important. It's important to look at where you are in your inquiry, looking at the inquiry cycle of the 5 stages, and then clarify the next steps that need to be taken before leaving the space. That's vital. You have to look and you have to say, okay, now that we have gotten to this level, now that we have defined the problem further and deeper, what are our next questions to take us forward, and how are we going to do that? It might be that you apply a new process, or it might be that you go back and you use the QFT yet again to even further clarify some of those priority questions that you selected. It might be going to your administration and saying, hey, we have these questions that are important to us, and we need to know them in order to really firm up our mission statement for our job. So you and your group at this point, after going through the process and then after reflecting on what the result of the process was, you should be able to come up with an agreed upon next step. So I shared some of the anecdotes, but I want to share a few more, and I have some quotes on the screen to give you an idea of how people feel coming out of an inquiry section. If successful, these stories are by far the most rewarding part of the work, and why I love facilitating inquiry. For another example, we had our business department, our finance department, come in and say, curiosity has nothing to do with making budgets and with disseminating money. And then by the end, they're like, hey, we're one of the most important pieces, because and their mission statement was really cool, because they started it with a question. They started it with, what could be more exciting than cultivating curiosity? Being part of the team that provides the resources to make it happen. And that mission statement was written on the manager's office, outside the office, and it's still there to this day. I absolutely love that, because it speaks to how poignant and how powerful the process can be. I love that my questions matter. That came from one of the custodians, because they said, I don't understand why we need to be part of this process. We just clean the floors. But bringing them together, making that effort to sit with them and to go through the process showed that their opinion was valuable. Another person said, my head's buzzing. I've never felt this curious before, and I love it. On the opposite side, somebody said, this is really hard, but in a good way. I like that it's so hard. The process made me proud of my work again. This should be used in every meeting. So much more could get done. So that statement right there, this should be used in every meeting. That actually was a result of these inquiry sessions. One of my other colleagues came to me and said, hey, I want to use this process or some sort of process to help me answer one of my questions. It was our training specialist. And through her professional development, through her, I forget what it was called, learning roadmap, she decided she wanted to look at how we could make training better and how we could just, she knew that it wasn't the best it could be and she wanted to make it better. So we sat down and I walked her through another little, very, very simple, but very powerful practice I like to call the 5 whys. And I asked her what she wanted to know. After she told me, I said, okay, why do you want to know that? She told me, and I said, okay, but why? And I was that incessant child going, but why, but why, but why? But I did it in a way that made her think harder about her inquiry and her question and get to the foundational question, not just the symptomatic ones. A lot of times we think we have our question, like I said earlier, it's let's see, I want to weed our CD collection. Why do you want to weed your CD collection? Well, because we just have too many. Okay, why do you think you have too many? Well, it just takes up a lot of room. Okay, well, let's look at your circulation. What does your circulation look like? Is it like, does the whole collection circulate efficiently and effectively? If not, okay, maybe you do need to weed it, because as many of us know, the smaller the collection, the easier it is for people to select choices and the more they're going to check out. But going through that, you're finding those underlying questions that are becoming basically building up all these other questions on top, and you have to dig through those symptomatic questions in order to get to the core question. But I'm getting away with myself. So she came to me and she asked me, and we went through the 5 whys, and her result was a very clear, simple, yet powerful inquiry. And that was, how do I improve EVPL staff training now and in the future? After establishing that clear inquiry, we asked who needed to be involved. So as you remember from the beginning, who's the community that this inquiry is affecting and who needs to be part of this process? So we built a team of colleagues from all different departments, all different locations, to use community inquiry, because it is community, because we as EVPL staff are a community in and of ourselves. So we used community inquiry to explore her question. We started with the bathtub, followed by the QFT, just like the mission inquiries. But after that, I was in brand new territory because we weren't done. Obviously, we weren't done. We had a long, long way to go, and we had a lot of questions to explore. So I looked at my toolkit of processes and techniques, and I chose the Ambassador Innovative process, which I had mentioned earlier. And it was complex. It's a complex process. It has stages and multiple steps within each stage. And honestly, talking about that process is grounds for a whole nother webinar, because it is very convoluted and very complex, but so powerful. It ended up taking us about 2 years to get through all of it, but normally it wouldn't take that long. This was during COVID. We had to shut down. We couldn't meet. There was probably at least 6 months, maybe 8 months, where we just had to stop. And when we came back together, we had to do a little bit of, relearning. Okay, where did we end? And this was one of the most important things. What do we now know after that experience that we can use to further inform improving training? And we had a lot more to include. And that's part of, if you remember, part of the investigation process. So we were pulling in more information to further clarify our question or to further inform us how to create something. So as a result, by the end of it, we had an exhaustive yet comprehensive training checklist for all EVPL staff to use from the moment they're hired through the duration of their employment. It included how often to do trainings. It included supplemental trainings if you wanted to learn more. And And it included changes, like if you had a job change, if you transferred, or if you got a promotion, it included all that as well. It was very comprehensive, and I'm proud to say that it's now used system-wide at ABPL, and it receives a lot of positive feedback. It's necessarily flexible because new trainings, new knowledge, new necessary skills are going to come along, and we need to be able to update it. So it is made in that it can be flexible as well. So my final slide is on some tips. You've got the process, you've got some ways to make stages of the process successful. But as a facilitator, I want to give you some additional tips that could help you. Always have your core question in the room. This is very powerful. And I mean, literally in the room, in a prominent place, on a large piece of paste, maybe it's a giant Post-it, and you have it written right there. So it's always there, and it's always visible and always there. So to remind your group why they are there and why they came together. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes curiosity can open up vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities can sometimes veer from the inquiry or not serve to further the inquiry. For example, in one of the mission statements, somebody asked the question, I don't know whether to write this question on the paper or not. I said, okay, well, what's the question? She said, we'll say Jane, why was Jane fired? I said, okay, it's a good question. You're curious about it. Let me ask you this. Will the answer to that question help you further understand our mission statement or help you create a departmental mission statement? The person thought about it and said, no, I guess not. I said, okay, all right. And that was all that was needed. But sometimes, let's say she said, well, I mean, maybe I don't support the reason that Jane got fired, and maybe I don't even want to work here. Sometimes there are questions that are so big and so powerful that they can impede our ability to go further in the process. And so you need to have some sort of tool to put it aside so that people understand, hey, I respect your question. And this is why it's called the parking lot. I literally have a piece of paper that says parking lot. And if a question comes up that's not relevant, I say, okay, this is clearly important to you. At least, it may be important to the whole group. And I recognize that this needs some time to be addressed. But we came today to talk about this inquiry. So we're going to, with your permission, I'm going to put this in the parking lot for us to address and dedicate time to later so we can come back to our inquiry. Is that okay? And I'm telling you, only once have I had to put something in the parking lot. More times than not, people just say, it's okay. It's not that important. But sometimes there are things that are that important, and they do need to be addressed. And to respect that also, as a facilitator, to respect that shows that you respect their questions, you respect their time. Don't be afraid to mix things up. Sometimes you might find that you have reached a sticking point and you don't know where to go. And you're like, okay, we know this problem, but what do we go from here? What do we do? What do we do? So sometimes don't be afraid to go back to a previous question. Maybe you can go back to all of the questions that you made on your QFT and say, okay, let's put the one that we're stuck with aside, and let's look at one of these other interesting questions and let that one ruminate for a while. Or maybe you need to take the question and apply a different process to it. That's okay. You can divert. If it's necessary, do it. At one point in the ambassador process, we got really granular at saying, what does the result look like? We, again, even though we were using a process, we wanted to jump to a solution. We wanted to jump to what does it look like? And we had to go back, and I did another QFT around a completely opposite question that had nothing to do about the end result. And that got us thinking in a different way. So don't be afraid to do that. Fourth, don't judge. As a facilitator, The inquiry might be important to you too. And so it might be very hard to do this, but as a facilitator, you have to be the impartial voice. You are the guide taking them through the process. You're not contributing, you're not leading the conversation. And this can be very difficult, especially when a particularly poignant idea is shared or an exciting revelation occurs. But do your best not to show preference or the opposite toward one idea or another. Now, as you guys noticed, I totally failed at that during the bathtub because I was laughing at some and I was going, okay. I was totally judging that. So you can see it's easier said than done to say, don't be partial, don't be biased. And as humans, it's not possible to be completely 100% impartial, but do your best to try. Finally, have fun. Inquiry is exciting. Inquiry is rewarding. I'm sure you guys had at least a little bit of fun during the bathtub, and that was virtual. This is even more powerful in person. As I had mentioned before, it's fun, and you get uncomfortable, you get silly, you get to a deeper level of camaraderie and trust and friendship with your group that you may never have before, and just enjoy the ride. And that's all I have to say about that. So I think I'm doing okay on time. We are at the question point.
All right, so I will remind everyone, go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And while we're waiting for you to do that, I will go ahead and throw one out there that I had. So in some of your examples, it sounds like the community was pretty straightforward. Obviously, the staff and maybe one particular patron group is pretty obvious, but do you have any tips or advice on identifying members of a community when it's maybe not so clear cut, or ways to reach out that you could throw out for the participants?
Yeah, so I do have one example. We did have a neighborhood association reach out to us and have a similar inquiry like the one I had put in the beginning about how do we improve educational attainment opportunities for youth. And this was the leaders of the neighborhood association that came to us for this question. And when we came, we had several conversations. We essentially did basically what was as simple as the reference interview. And we said, okay, what assumptions are you making? That was something I didn't include in my thing. We can make a lot of assumptions, or a question can be so built up on assumptions. Now, obviously there weren't assumptions in the neighborhood attainment question. They were struggling with some very real problems, but honestly, the QFT will help. We walked through something similar to the QFT. It wasn't exactly the QFT, but we basically asked them to put down questions about why they felt that their children were failing. And the real results that came out of that were tangible things that we could move on from. Like one parent said, my kid doesn't have anything to do after school. So we took that and we said, okay, what can we do about that? And not necessarily what can we do, but do other members of the community have this same experience? And if they did, those people with that same specific challenge could come together. It's easier to tackle the small than the big. Educational attainment or youth success is huge, and there's so many pieces. So what we had to do with that very large overarching thing was to take it apart and find the smaller ones that people were particularly passionate about, and create smaller groups that wanted to create action around that. So what the result was something called Southside Stars. And it was a few mothers who got together and started an after-school program and club, and just opened up the clubhouse, the neighborhood clubhouse, where kids could come and create their own programs. It was very, very, very participatory, and yeah, it ended up being a success. It's still going, and I can't tell you whether or not they succeeded in improving overall educational attainment, because that's years and years, and impact is hard, very hard to prove. So you have to look at anecdotes like I shared on there, if to see if you know, you're headed in the right direction. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
kind of.
so
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions? I haven't seen anything in the chat, but feel free to put them in.
And don't judge your questions.
All right, well, while you're thinking about that, I will go ahead and grab the form for the LEU before I forget.
Oh, and also, I know I went through a whole lot of processes and tools and techniques, and if anyone is curious about learning more about those or how I incorporated them, please feel free to reach out. This is what I'm passionate about, and I love sharing my ideas, so, and what I've learned. So if you want to learn more, just contact me at my email address there. Oh, there it is. Sorry.
So the form is up. If you have any questions, we will be happy to stick around for a little while longer. If you don't, please enjoy the rest of your time this morning. We'll hang out here for a few more minutes, but it looks like we're getting quite a few thank yous.
Mhm.
So
Thank you.
Lisa, if you would like to stop the recording.